I need to rebuild my entire life from the ground up, starting with, well, me, my mind. One of the first things I did is I met with pastors afterwards, and I just kind of shared my whole story, and I'm like, I just want the truth.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Redeemed Man podcast. I'm Nate Dewberry, and today I have with me Sammy Cosa. Sammy is a fellow podcaster. He co-hosts Created to Lead. He's married and has 4 kids. He was a longtime resident of Southern California, but now is a resident of Idaho, transplanted just before the COVID pandemic began. Sammy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Look forward to having everybody hear your story and hear what you're doing through your podcast, Created to Lead, and even just your journey and your faith walk. We're going to jump in with some kind of rapid fire questions just so our audience gets to know you a little bit in some quick, fun way.
Cool.
What's your favorite childhood memory?
Oh my gosh, favorite childhood memory. You didn't prepare me for these questions about to come up. I guess just right off the top of my head, I learned from a very young age how detail oriented I was. And so one of my favorite childhood memories among many is I just loved opening CD artwork. As weird as that sounds, I would dissect the artwork. And it really rolls into a lot of what I do today, just very detail oriented, trying to put the pieces together of why that artist thought of that artwork to reflect that song. But I would say that's a weird memory I have that a lot of people are fascinated by when I mention that, because most people are not that fascinated about CD artwork, but I always was.
Yeah, we rarely even pick up a CD anymore, which is crazy, isn't it?
And I still buy them for that very reason. I just love dissecting, and I just feel like there's more meaning behind the songs when you see the art that goes with it.
So I have to know, since you brought that up, what are some of your favorite artwork or albums on artwork?
Oh my gosh. Now, so this is going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with the group Avalon.
Yes.
Or DC Talk,
DC
the Newsboys.
Classic.
Yeah, so just a combination of just classic 90s CCM.
Some of my favorite were the ones that you could pull out and you had more images from the groups.
Totally.
And it was a whole like poster package.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that was not what I expected. So thank you.
What were you expecting, Nathan?
It was not CD artwork.
It defined my upbringing and modern day too.
Understand. What do you love most about living in Idaho?
Oh my goodness. Now this could be a whole episode in itself. So coming from Southern California, we wanted the complete opposite. Other than the ocean, my wife and I still love the ocean, which we don't have here in Idaho. But the positives far outweigh the negatives for sure. I would just say community. Idaho is such a community-rich place that I'm sure if you've read any news headlines, I just saw one a couple days ago, actually, just mainstream news, Californians flocking to Idaho.
Yes.
I did that about 3 weeks before the pandemic, so I beat a lot of people here, which I'm grateful for. But it really is just an amazing place of like-minded fathers, families that are here for the sole reason of just really enjoying freedom and finding like-minded families. So it's been really fun to meet a lot of new people.
Well, it's one of those places that's on my bucket list to visit. I have not been to Idaho, but been around Idaho. So it's on my list.
So as someone who has never uttered the word Idaho or even knew where it was before 2019, it is a really special place. Far more things to offer than just potatoes. I'll tell you that much.
Well, Sammy, tell me who has influenced your faith the most?
That's a great question. I don't have to give it much thought. It would have to be my wife. My wife has definitely influenced my faith the most. And the reason for that is she's an amazing woman of God that inspires me every single day to just become better in every aspect of life. So my wife.
I always say that the strongest and most healthy men have an amazing wife by their side. So
So true.
kudos to you for having a great wife by your side who encourages you and makes you better. How would she describe you?
Oh, how would she describe me? She would describe me as, this is her, because she's mentioned this before. Just a very kind person. I try to make everyone feel loved and appreciated, and so which is what inspired Created to Lead. Just seeing a lot of not so great leadership, and
Yeah.
knowing that leadership really is all about serving people, and so that's what inspired our own podcast a year ago. So yeah, I would just say the way I see people and don't forget people is probably what she would say off the top of my head.
Well, that's very kind things that she would have to say about you for sure. My wife always jokes about my looks, which is hilarious because I'm like it makes me uncomfortable every single time, and so I'm sure your wife says the same thing. So honor you by focusing on the kind things that she talks about your character.
Yes. Well, what does your wife say about your looks, Nathan?
She jokes and she makes the kids completely uncomfortable because she'll say
Oh, totally.
my hunk of manly flesh and just she will go on about it and the kids blush and they're like stop.
That's so funny. What a
But I'm
great
thankful
wife.
for it, thankful for it for
Yes,
sure.
as you should be.
What hobby do you enjoy the most?
Mm. Hands down, it would be design and photography.
And so how long have you been in photography?
I started when I was 15, so I'm now 38. So is that 23 years?
Now, obviously, photography has changed a lot since you were 15.
Yes, it
So,
has.
what's one of your favorite transformations in the photography world? Because I know for me, it's crazy just thinking back to taking pictures when you didn't know what you were going to get until it came in the
Yes,
mail or you picked it up at the
totally.
photography service.
Well, I will say the very first weddings that I photographed were with 20 rolls of film and processed at a Rite Aid or a Walgreens.
Yeah,
So I think the biggest advancement in photography is digital and
yeah,
seeing the images on the spot, being able to adjust the lighting and all that stuff right away. So it's definitely come a long way. I mean, iPhones these days are
yeah.
almost enough to capture everything, which is, it's just changed dramatically. That I'm
It,
super grateful for.
Yeah, it's so crazy that almost everybody has the ability to have a professional, in some ways, photograph just by having their phone, and that is was
Absolutely.
unheard of a few years ago. So crazy.
Totally. We've come a long
Well,
way.
Sammy, thanks for honoring me with some of those quick questions. Just a little bit of fun to get us started. But one of the things I'd love to really jump into first is how you ended up in Idaho, those changes that happened in your life around that season, because I know there were some pretty drastic changes for you and your family. And I'd love to know about those changes and kind of why you made the move to Idaho.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so 2019 was a very defining year for us. I would say for a handful of years leading up to 2019, I was just in work mode. I mean, I was at the time with a family of three kids with a wife, so family of five. And so I was just working, building, businesses, and just in work mode. Always a believer, always loved the Lord. Went to church as often as I could whenever I wasn't traveling. But 2019, God really shook up our lives. Really, the summer of 2019, my whole family got sick, and just events led us to questioning a lot of the established. I don't want to get too political, but just the established pharmaceutical
Yeah.
approach. Just some things that we saw the writing all over the wall happening in Southern California, well, just in California in general. And some pretty silly laws got passed in the fall of 2019 that really made me uncomfortable to continue seeing a future for my family raised there,
Yeah.
feeling like everything I believed really where I was residing at was completely against the values that I believed in. And so my wife and I had a conversation and said, okay, what's going to be the final straw? Because we were already almost over the edge. And it was if one more possible law got passed, that we would be gone. And sure enough, a month after that conversation, that law got passed, and we knew it was time. It was time to look for where to go. And I always joke, but it's absolutely true. Our first destination that we were going to move to was Costa Rica, and Idaho was just supposed to be a little stomping ground to kind of figure out more things. But once our families found out that Costa Rica was an option, they flipped. They never thought they'd see their, my parents would see their grandkids, and
Yeah.
so we chose Idaho. Simultaneously, there were shifts in my business at the time as well, with some partnerships. Just saw a lot of integrity things that were not aligned with my values, and
Yeah.
so part of starting a new life was to figure out, gosh, what am I even going to do for a career? I know I want to walk away from this partnership in the foreseeable near future, but what does that look like? Because it's not possible in California. So that's what it looked like. um, Leading up to January 2020, we sold our house. In the first week of February, we were in beautiful southern Idaho.
Well, I know Idaho is definitely not Southern California. Um, but I'm thankful for the community that you guys have found there, and we'll definitely talk a little bit more about that. But I'm
Yes.
curious with the partnership that you left, and
Yeah.
the kind of the unethical things that you felt like were going on in that situation. How did you navigate
Hmm.
honoring that partner and yet kind of breaking away and really not following kind of the things and the what he was willing to do?
Yeah. It's pretty crazy because when I told him that we were leaving Southern California, he almost forbid me from moving.
Hmm.
And that was the final straw for me
Yeah,
personally in a partnership.
sure.
Just because I knew what I knew was best for my family,
Yeah,
and for someone to tell me that that would alter the success of whatever we were building, um, it just didn't sit right in my spirit. And so it wasn't until those conversations, I would say, I was very much a people pleaser, because of my love for people, not wanting to hurt people's feelings. I kept a lot of things internalized. I think the best thing I could have done was be honest. And that's what I finally did in 2019, 2020, when I decided to leave. I finally decided to stand up for what I knew I believed in, was important to me, and no longer at the sake of someone else just feeling good or being successful, but more so willing to walk away because of the importance of and the value of honesty being in my life. And so I would say that was the huge thing that I walked away with, was I'm glad I was honest. I needed to share all these things, walk away, but share the very reasons why it was absolutely time to walk away.
yeah. Sammy, with you thinking about that walking away, how's God blessed your obedience and stepping out from under and not just falling in line with wanting to please and really at that point being able to be honest? How has God shown himself faithful in this move?
Oh my goodness. Nathan, I can't even, every single day I'm driving, this is not even a joke. I tell this to my wife almost every single night. Every time I'm driving in my new life, I'm thanking the Lord. Just thank you for, I just can't imagine what my life would look like if God did not compel me to make those steps forward for my family and doing what I know was right in my spirit for so long. I may have mentioned this to you, but the day I walked away from that partnership, for the very first time ever in my life, the next morning, I woke up with no pain in my life. So something I struggled with was autoimmunity, something called fibromyalgia, which is just
Yeah.
widespread body pain, usually due to something either physically traumatic or emotionally traumatic, and just pain that you can't describe, sensitive to touch and all that stuff, migraines. The next day I walked from that partnership, I felt like I was walking on clouds. And it hit me in that moment how the weight of stress and the weight of manipulation and things that I
Yeah.
was wrestling with, that when I finally gave it to the Lord and walked away from it all, the blessings that came. So what blessings have come since then? My health has been restored. I mean, my just my life, my wife, my children, the way that we interact, there's just so much more joy because of that burden that I was so carrying without even knowing what the burden was. It was everything. When it finally was laid down and given up, I literally was given a new life.
I think so many people discount the physical impact of stress
Ah,
and strain in their life. And I
totally.
know if you do have a physical condition or something that's bothering you, I would recommend everybody like take it a holistic approach. It
Yes.
is,
Amen.
figure out what you can do medically and definitely seek out advice, but it's got to be looked at from every element of our life. So many people want to just take a pill to fix something, and the reality of it
Right.
is if there's something on in us, we need to examine every area of our life, a holistic approach. I mean, that's even when I talk to people about counseling. There's
Right.
great help for us with mental health, but there's also practical steps that we need to take, like working out and eating good and taking care, making sure that we're eliminating some stresses and strains in our life. So could not that's a perfect picture of how a situation and the pain that was going on in your life was really manifesting itself in your health. And praise God for just being able to step away from it and have victory and freedom in that area.
Yeah, 100%. And we can talk about this conversation, Nathan, but I'm a huge advocate for that. There's always a root cause. And when we just mask it and try to fill it with something else that temporarily satisfies, it's just not going to. And it's just going to get worse if it's not dealt with. I will say, though, as much as I am so excited about where I'm at today, and for those listening, men, wives, or whoever's tuning in right now, just know that it was a journey. So
Yeah.
to not paint it like it was a perfect,
Yeah.
like, oh, everything is amazing now. So I walked away from six figures overnight. And yes, the pain was gone the next day, but it did come back 3 days later. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so there was now the reality of like, I have four kids now, I have a family of six to take care of, and I just walked away from my income, and which started a whole nother journey of healing, of recovery, of rebuilding, which is why in 2021, I have a notebook, and every single year, my wife and our kids, we choose just a theme or a word that we want to really, on top of just growing in the Holy Spirit and growing with our relationship with the Lord, just, of course, those daily things that we know we're going to grow in.
You mentioned the word rebuild. We're recording this in 2023 and it's going to be released in 2024. Do you know your word for 2024 yet?
I do. I just decided it yesterday.
Do you mind sharing with our audience?
I do. Well, can I give you the trajectory of my words? I have them written down.
Yes.
So 2021 was rebuild. 2022 was redeem, which I think perfectly fits this podcast. But redeem was, as that year of refinement and rebuilding, God really showed that He was redeeming aspects of my life that I thought were dead. And so going into 2022, there was this redemption story that we'll have to do a part two if that's okay, Nathan, in
For
the
sure.
future. But that's a whole nother story. And then 2023, this year for 2023, it was nourish, and just really cultivating and taking care of all of this blessing that now God has given me, my family, my church family, business, and things like that. And now here I am, 2024, and the word is patience. So that's my theme is God is constantly reminding me I still got to be patient, still under construction, still a work in progress.
Is there something right now that you are walking through that really makes that word resonate with your spirit?
Yes, absolutely. Such great questions, Nathan. Yeah, I mean, I think right now what I'm going through is because I'm a very driven individual, very. Natalia tells me, my wife, that I'm probably the most ambitious person she knows. And she usually says that when I ask if I'm lazy for resting every once in a while. She's just like, are you kidding me? You're like the most ambitious person I know. Um, but because of so much that's transpired since that walk away and just God taking us on this remarkable journey of really redemption, I mean, a perfect word that describes it. I'm a go-getter, right? So I want to get right back up, and I want to see this happen and that happen. And what I'm realizing is if I don't have it yet, whatever that might be, whether it's monetary in business, or even in health. I'm very
Yeah.
passionate about health right now. Even if I don't have it yet, it's because God's still working on me, and He wants me to. He wants to accomplish something in me. So really, I know we hear this all the time. Enjoy the process. The process is, the prize. But I really believe it is. It's just the sanctifying work that God is really doing. If you
Yeah.
want to put it in
Yeah.
biblical terms, don't rush that, because God is literally building you in the sanctification process. And that's what God is constantly reminding me. Slow down, abide in Him, be faithful is another word I keep going back to, is be faithful and committed, where God currently has me, and just patient for the blessing to come, whether it's in health goals, whether it's in business goals, whether it's raising kids.
Yeah.
Patience really is the theme of my life right now, all encompassing.
Yeah, you never know the timetable of the journey God has for you. We
For
often look
sure.
around us and see other people's timetable and we want their timetable. And yet
Totally.
the reality of it is God has a timetable that's specific for us. And when you look at scripture, you see young pastors like Timothy and the story of, David as a young man, but then you also see stories like Abraham, who's an elderly gentleman who
Right.
God is using at a very different season of his life, and Moses, who in the latter part of his life, God is really using to impact the kingdom. And I think so many times we look and go, "Hey, I want this." And God goes, "No, I've got a perfect plan for you."
Right.
And that process for you looks very different. And the sanctification work in our life, we're all on a different journey. But we do get to do it together, which is a lot of fun. And I'm
Totally.
thankful for the community that I have around me. And I'm thankful for the community that I've heard that is around you there in Idaho, in the area that you are. Um, Thinking about your community, you mentioned, well, going back to redeemed, you mentioned that being the word. I would love to hear what redemption means for you. You mentioned God
Mm.
redeeming some things in your life. What does
Oh
that mean for you?
man, Nathan, the best way I can describe it is coming to the Four Seasons, a state with four seasons, which I never had in Southern California. The best way I can describe redemption tangibly in my life is living in winter where everything is, you think everything is dead. They
Yeah.
can never come back to
Yeah.
life. I remember our first winter here. I'm like, how is this going to change? I mean, it's so barren. It's so dead. It's just this eeriness in that season. It's beautiful too. But then spring comes around the corner and it's just, for lack of better words, it's just magnificent. It is so healing, right? You start seeing leaves grow, birds chirping, things are literally coming back to life that you thought were dead. And they were for a season. So redemption, I would describe it like that. It's personally in my life, it's how I've seen it. Is I thought parts of me were dead or
Yeah.
seasons of me were dead, and then God comes in and brings it back to life like only He can. So I would say redemption is a second chance over and over and over and over and over again. Is how I can best describe it personally. How I've seen it manifested in my life through the power of Jesus Christ.
Sammy, thank you for that visual picture. I love the seasons. And so for me, I think definitely you being a visual artist in a lot of ways with photography and design, that is such a perfect picture of redemption and restoration. And I think so
Mm,
much of what God does is bringing things out of that brokenness, bringing stuff out of that pain, out of that season where it seems like everything's turned upside down and there's no hope, that God brings hope and brings that restoration in our life. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that you were a believer early on, following
yeah.
Christ. How did you come to know the Lord? Tell me a little bit about your growth as a young Christian, and what are some things and practices that you learned early on to implement into your life to stay on track in your relationship with Christ?
Yeah. So, yeah, from a very early age, I'm so grateful for what my parents really demonstrated in my life. So, I'm the youngest of nine children, and my parents are immigrants from Romania. So, five of my brothers and sisters were born in Romania, and the remaining four, me being included as the baby, were born in Southern California. And so, what I really believe my parents demonstrated really well, not that they were perfect, but this attribute I'm so grateful for is they instill just that reverence for the Lord,
Yeah.
and that discipline to pursue Him. I mean, even today, my parents are in their 70s, but they are the most excited. Maybe when they're with their grandkids, that's probably up there too. But they're the most excited when they go to church. They just love church. They love being there and being around community and their friends. And some of their friends have been going there with them for 40 years. I just love that they demonstrated being faithful, in the church that they were at. And I understand churches can, disperse for different reasons, or you leave a church
Yeah.
maybe for a calling, and there's definitely reasons for that. But they just fell in love and they just stayed committed and they just love it. Like my mom comes the most alive when she talks about church and how much she just heard from the Lord, got to experience the Lord. And so from a very early age, I would say that's what I saw demonstrated, is just this love for church, this love for Jesus, the head of the church, and this just being in his word, and not just knowing of him, but really knowing him,
Yeah.
and using your gifts in the church and community. Huge, just being around. I mean, I'm not sure if you know many Romanians, but we are huge on family and community
Yes.
and eating and laughing and singing. So I'm just grateful that that was really what started the foundation for my walk with the Lord.
Yeah, I think the previous generation, when I look at it, one of the things I think about is and it's not a great description, I guess, but it's stick with it. Like they whatever they were doing, they stuck with it. Like it was
Yeah,
whether it was their job or their church, like that previous generation before us, so many of them, were at the same jobs for 35, 40 years, and a church that's plugged in and serving and giving their life to it. And we kind of
right.
live in a new time where everybody seems to be shifting a lot more and constant
Yeah.
change. But I think about that generation. There's a lot that we can learn and glean from their faithfulness. And I think you really encompassed that picture with your parents and talking about how they demonstrated that faithfulness to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in turn something that's been part of your life. I mean, you
Yeah.
are faithful to where you were in Southern California to be in a church, and then transitioning to a new community and finding a community there and plugging in and being faithful. So thank you for
Mm-hmm.
modeling that. Thank you for your parents, for the previous generation, for
Right.
sowing that into you. It's
So
so
important.
cool to look back and see how God used the generation before us to even shape who we are today.
Right.
So your family's immigrated to the United States. How did you meet your wife coming into Southern California? I've got to hear the story. 4 kids now later, moving to a
Yes.
different state. How did you meet your wife?
We met at church. We did, which I
No
think
better
is
place. No
is the
better
best
place.
place.
Yes.
Yes. I always joke because I have to explain this, but I was her Sunday school teacher. Stop right there. Don't think too much about that. I was only 5 years older. I was the assistant Sunday school teacher. She was 12 when I pretty much met her, but never thought of anything of her. We lived in the same neighborhood, so I always saw her. She's one of 7. So I just see parents with like the little ducklings walking down, down the street. Our house was walking distance from the church. And so, I would see their, family of 9, walking to church, and never thought anything of her, of course. And I always joke, it's so silly, but when she was 17 and I was 22, I guess at the time, we had both never dated anyone. We were both faithful to wait for, our significant other. I definitely believed in dating. I just had not found the right person up until 22 years old. And there was just, I call it just this Holy Spirit glow about her when she was 17. I would quickly learn that she had just gotten baptized, and she was just, it was and still is just in love with the Lord. You could just see it in her eyes, just this glimmer of something so special about her. And so at 17, the first thing I said when I saw her again, which the last time was probably when she was 12, in Sunday school. And I was just like, Natalia, is that you? And she's just like, yeah, it is. I'm like, oh my gosh, you blossomed. That's the first thing I said. And I'm like, oh shoot, probably not the best thing to say, but it was super innocent. And I'm like, you've blossomed. And she's like, thank you. And it started from there. She knew me as a photographer, and she was a little nervous because she would see my photographs around our community and things. And I just asked her out for coffee. She had never had coffee up to that point. She only had hot chocolate. We joke about that all the time. And at the time, we just met at a coffee shop, and it just really within months, we had just fallen in love. It was just this pure, we would get together and talk about the Bible. We'd read together. We started a whole relationship reading Max Lucado books. I'd buy her a book. I'd buy my book. We'd read it separately and then come back and talk about the chapters we read. And it was just this sweet, like pure. It's everything that we both were praying and hoping
Yeah.
for. And so when it happened, I was just like, she's the one. And she eventually realized I was the one. She envisioned someone a little bit darker and taller, I think, which we worked through that throughout our 2-year relationship. But just this beautiful, honestly, pure. We just want to do it God's way. We were on the same page with that. And once again, it goes to our upbringings. I would say a huge portion of my gratitude for both of our upbringings being very similar is it was modeled with our parents. And I guess you see the importance of that. It's not, I think I remember reading this quote. It's not about our kids memorizing things, because they're not going to be perfect in memorizing things, but they're going to remember things that are modeled.
Yes.
They'll remember things that are modeled. And so both of our parents did a really great job of modeling, once again, that love for God's word, the love for God's people, trying to honor him, revere him with your life, and be a Bible believing Christian, not just this nominal culture Christian, but someone who really is a Christ follower.
Yeah.
And I saw that the moment I started getting to know her over her hot chocolate and me coffee, and eventually she got some espresso in there and turned into a mocha. But that was the start of our relationship, and we got married 2 years later.
And how long have you guys been married now?
We got married in 2019, so this coming fall it'll be 15 years, and it flew by. It flew by. It's crazy.
Well, and your kids' ages?
Our oldest is 12, and our youngest is 2.
All
So
right.
we have 4, and it's a wild, fun ride.
Well, I know with your youngest, there were some challenges at birth. Can you share a little bit about the journey that you guys walked through? Because I know a lot of people experience that, where there is a time
Mm,
and season where you just wonder if your child is going to be there with you and how much that can weigh on you. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about you guys and that process.
yeah, absolutely. So in 2021, so a year after we moved to Idaho, a few months after we moved to Idaho, we were expecting our fourth child. Entire pregnancy was normal up until even the birth actually being totally normal. Everything was amazing. Mind you, a few months prior, so 2020, I walked away from the business partnership. I was still trying to figure out how to provide, what life looked like. And then rebuild was my 2021 word. So in the process of rebuilding, and little did I know God would use the birth of my fourth son to be a part of that rebuilding process. So Ezra, which means helper or the Lord's helper, and it was perfect for what would transpire. But he was born totally normal. It wasn't until I cut the umbilical cord that we quickly saw him fading away. And the reason for that we would soon learn, was he was born essentially too fast. He came out of birth canal rather quickly, and not enough time for his lungs to squeeze out the
Yeah.
fluids. So because he was attached to the umbilical cord, he was still breathing and he was doing fine. It wasn't until I cut the umbilical cord that we started seeing this quick regression of life. And at that particular birth, being the second home birth, was pretty traumatic because we weren't in a hospital. We had an amazing midwife and her team that were there. But as his fingers were turning white and his life really fading away, um, it was a day I'll never forget. The ambulance came. It was the last day of winter. And this is why I love seasons. Can I just say back on that real quick? Something I've realized in every season, it represents Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
I want to just touch that part, because who do we look to that was once dead and brought to life? Is Jesus. And it's not until realizing that seasons all serve a purpose and they all point to Jesus. But even the last day of winter was the day my son was born. It was March 19th. It is March 19th, which is the last day of winter. And so that last day of winter, we're driving behind this ambulance, not knowing if our son's going to make it. It doesn't look good. We make it to the hospital, and now he's there for 18 days in the NICU. And I remember driving to the hospital. My wife had just given birth. She's in the ambulance, not even recovered. I'm following behind with a friend who heard the ambulance in our neighborhood, and he just felt this in his spirit that it was for us. They came for us. So he drove his car to our house. And so he drove me to the hospital right behind the ambulance. I can't really explain the feeling you feel when you're behind an ambulance, knowing your newborn son is right in front of you
Yeah.
and you don't know if
Yeah.
he's going to make it. The only thought, I had two actually, the only two thoughts that came to mind was, number one, people need to pray. That's our only hope. We need people to pray. So texted everyone I could, please pray for Ezra. And I had this text I just created real quick and just sent it to everyone I knew. I just knew God's people needed to pray, number one. And then number two, as my friend's driving me, he was playing some worship music. I was bawling my eyes out. And I just said, Lord, if you save our son from this point forward, I'm dedicating my life and my family's life to whatever you want us to do. And I already had that heart, like, Lord, whatever you want, I'm going to do it. But I was like, Lord, I really mean it now. Like whatever
Yeah.
you want to do
Yeah.
with my life, my family's life, we are yours. And he was there for 18 days. Once we got to the hospital, we found out he made it, and they didn't know the state of his brain or anything like that. But it was 18 days, Nathan. It was 18 days of God's faithfulness. Every single day it was, he's doing a little bit better. We had to do, I mean, they had to freeze his body at one point. They had to warm it back up. It was just things I never even knew you can do to a newborn baby. And each test, he just got better and better. And I'll never forget the moment I was singing a song over him because we were really praying for certain numbers in his lungs to change, and they weren't moving in the right direction quick enough. Uh, and I believe I prayed Waymaker, Miracle Worker, Promise Keeper. I prayed that over him, and then instantly, right before my eyes, I saw his numbers go in the right direction. And the process of rebuilding my life in 2021, that being the theme that I really felt God laid on my heart and my spirit, this is going to be your theme. He used almost the loss of my son to rebuild my faith in him, my trust in him, and seeing him even in those moments where once again you thought he was gone and God brought him back to life. And that's what we ended up calling him Ezra, because it's the Lord is our helper. The Lord
Yeah.
is our help. And it was only the Lord's help that got us through that. And then we got out of the NICU and we came to a fundraiser event that a local coffee shop, once again, the community here is just, I have never seen anything like this, but a local coffee shop that my friends own threw a fundraiser event because our medical bills were over $300,000. They threw this amazing fundraiser event. When my wife and I walked into that coffee shop, it was after hours. It was all proceeds would be donated to his medical bills and all that stuff. When my wife and I walked in and saw the lines of people, like I get teary eyed. When we saw lines of people out the door to come alongside us and support us, I mean, Natalia bawled right away. She was just like, "How do they know? How do they know us?" And I'm like, "That was me." Yeah, I've known them all for the last couple of years. It's just what I love talking to people. She's like, "How do you know them all?" I'm like, "Just the Lord, honey. I don't know. It's just bump into someone, say hi, and the rest is history." So uh, that process of rebuilding was once again the process of breaking, I would say, because in order for God to build you, He's got to break you down a bit to
Yeah.
rebuild you to who you need to be. So hope that answers your question. That's what that season looked like.
Yeah, Sammy, thank you for sharing that. I know, obviously things turned out for good. So there's the peace in that, but it's difficult when you go back and think about those emotions and think about the journey that you walked through. So thank you for being willing to share that. Cause I do know that will speak to people because, whether it's a young child or a season later in life, we all go through
Right.
those things that can really shake us, make
Totally.
us question whether or not God really is good. And the reality of it is he is good in all things. And we
Amen.
don't always see how he's working it for his good and glory and for our benefit, but he's working those things out. And in your life, if you testify to that, of that season of rebuilding and where you are now and how God has used each and every one of those things to refine you and your wife and your family and make
Mm-hmm.
you guys more like him and reflect him more and giving you new relationships. One of the things that stands out to me throughout everything that you've shared is talking a lot about the community around you.
Yeah.
For us as a men's ministry, one of the biggest things that we believe in is getting guys around us who, on a bad day, if we aren't where we need to be, that they can tell the difference even by our voice. And
Right.
I would like to know in your life how you've surrounded yourself with those men who
Mm-hmm.
not only hold you accountable but encourage you. Because I think you can look, and I think there's some bad connotations to accountability if it's just about accountability and what not to do. But I
Right.
think when you have brothers who you enjoy doing life together, you laugh together, you celebrate the good gifts that God's given you, but you also push each other and encourage each other and
Right.
make each other better. How do you keep that a part of your everyday life there in the community that you are in now? You moved to a new place, so you've had to form new relationships. What does that look
Yeah.
like for Sammy?
Oh man, it looks like it's so fun. Is what it looks like. It's absolutely, every relationship is different, and I think I'll start there. Something I had to learn moving to Idaho is I know who I am and I know what I give in a friendship. And
Yes.
usually I'm the type of person, and you might be this way, I'm not sure, but where everyone comes to you for advice in the sense of you'll understand them. So you're not going to be the one to judge them. They really feel safe around
Yeah.
you. You're the go-to for people's problems, and it can get a little overwhelming at times. It's like, I know
Yes.
too much about people. But I also know that I've learned to accept that that's a gifting,
Mhm.
and I'm going to use it for God's glory and be there to serve, right? What's been hard for me and something I've had to learn is I need to humble myself and be that same way to others as well. Because when people think you've got it all together,
Yep.
let's be real, we don't. And it wasn't until 2020 when my life shattered right before my very
Yeah.
eyes, and even for a few lingering months and a couple years after that, had to really humble myself. And I guess I never realized how prideful I was in that I'm the one that's always okay and people can come to me. I'm strong and I can help people feel comfortable and safe and give them biblical wisdom
Yeah.
and be there for them. But I didn't have that in my life. So that's a huge thing that I decided needed to change, moving to a new place and starting all over. It was really a fresh start to really build myself through God's leading to be rebuilt. And so it looks different. I don't expect now that something I've learned about relationships and friendships when it comes to accountability with other men is what I think the question is coming from. Is I no longer have this expectation because I do have a high standards expectations on myself. I've learned to not put that on other people, and that's really
Yeah.
helped me a ton. Without help me with not being disappointed in other people because I know what my standards are and how I deliver. And so I've had to learn to not have those same expectations on people, and that alone has really revived my joy for friendship and
Yeah.
my longing for it, actually, when I don't have this unrealistic expectations on them. But the way it looks like today is it looks different. I have one friend, for example, he's half my age, and he's one of my best friends. Was actually coming over tonight for dinner with his wife and their daughter. He's 20 years old and I'm 38, but we're the closest friends we probably have in each other's life. We work out 3 to 5 times a week together. We talk about the Lord afterwards. We pray for one another, and so our relationship really is workout buddies who love
Yeah.
the Lord. And it's barbells and Bibles. It's what we do. Like it's just that's one relationship. And then once in a while, we'll invite each other over and all that good stuff. Another friendship is just like my pastor, who's my age, and we just had lunch, and conversations are about church, and how we're loving our wives and our
Yeah.
children, and did we go on a date with our wife. So it's accountability. Make sure we're taking our health seriously as we're getting a little bit older. And then I'll just use my final example is my buddy Alex, who I co-host our podcast together with, and we don't see each other too often. We probably see each other mostly when we record together, but our friendship is doing something we love. We're both passionate about leadership, and we're always there to text each other and be there. But I don't see him too often. And when we do, once again, we're doing a podcast together. We're recording. Really, our podcasts are when we catch up with each other, and so that's what that relationship looks like. So they're all different. I don't have these crazy unexpected expectations on them. They're lighthearted, they're fun, but they're also real, they're authentic, and we are real with each other and humble in being real with one another, if that makes sense. So that's how I would describe my relationships today. They're just extremely fun.
No, that's great. I think there's so much beauty there. I think there's so much wisdom there too with having relationships with people that are in different locations but at the end of the day, you enjoy doing life together.
Totally.
You may not see each other all the time. Your rhythms may look different
Yeah.
depending on where each person is with their life and what they have going on. And yet there's a willingness and intentionality to be open, to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be encouraging, to be life-giving, to be supportive. And that's really what it's all about. A lot of people, I think, want or imagine relationships of everybody, all my buddies we're the same age, our kids are the same age. And in the reality of it is that doesn't always make us the best version of ourselves.
Right.
We sometimes can look just like everybody else, but we find the people that God sends into our life in a season. I think about when you talk about the guy that's half your age. I have a buddy right now that's here in the Columbus area because he came because of the military, originally from
Mm,
Minnesota. God's brought him here. We connected at church, and he's just become one of my very best friends in this season. And I know he's not going to be here that long. He's here for training course, so he'll be in Italy next stop. So,
Wow.
but in this season, God has just used this relationship to refresh me, and I think encourage him as well. And so, relationships change.
Right.
They don't always stay the same. They're not static. And so, one of the things, even in you sharing that, it's such a good reminder to take advantage of each season that you're in. And then when you
Right.
get to that next season, to cultivate those relationships, because every
Yeah.
season they're going to look different.
100%. And that was a hard lesson I had to learn. As a lot of what I say now, I use as I get older. I say that
Yeah.
a lot now, but as I get older, I've realized that it's okay if your season of friendships look different than they did in the previous season, because God can use people for a reason or a season or a lifetime. There's purpose in all of those, as long as those friendships didn't end in malice or drama or whatever,
Yeah.
and they just kind of faded because you're elsewhere now. I've had to accept the fact that that's okay too, because I used to want to try to keep in touch with everyone,
Yeah.
especially leaving a state. Like I want to keep in touch with everyone because I want them to know I love them still.
Yeah.
The reality is I can't. Like I have a wife and 4 kids, and just my capacity just it
Good
won't be
word.
good for
Yeah.
anyone. And so I've had to realize, like, I keep my circles small, but they're chosen, they are real. And just like you said with your friend, you have a great time.
Yeah.
And really the foundation is you love Jesus, and so those friendships are going to be really amazing
Yeah.
on so many
No.
levels.
That's a great reminder for all of us. There's a season for everything, and even our friendships, God brings people in and out of our lives, and that we may be closer. One of my very best friends in the world, we rarely talk anymore, but I
Yeah.
literally know that if I picked up the phone right now and said I need
Yes.
something, he would take care of it. And that's the
Totally.
kind of friends that we are. But we with his job and my job, there's
Right.
no
Totally.
way, no
Right.
way.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
thank you for sharing that. I think that's super important for guys to understand.
Yes.
Last thing, we could talk for probably another hour. I feel like maybe longer than that. But talk to me about Created to Lead. Talk to me how that developed and what you're learning from other leaders in this season. What
Yeah.
you're excited about with Created to Lead. And uh, I know when you step into a podcast world, there's so much you're learning. You're creative by nature. I see that and hear that through and through. But what is God teaching you in this season as you co-host this with Alex?
Mm. Well, first, let me just say you need to be a guest. I
Well,
cannot
I
wait.
definitely want to be a guest. We
Oh,
can
Nathan,
continue our conversation.
you don't even know. Throughout this whole conversation, I was going to bring the question right back to you and be like, so, Nathan, but what about you? What do your friendships look like? And I've been holding myself because I can't wait to hear more of your story. So I'm letting you do the interview on this episode, but I cannot wait to ask you these similar questions,
Looking forward
and
to it.
more so. Yeah, what really inspired our own podcast, it launched actually a year ago, December 7th, 2022, last year. And what really inspired it is just the journey that I had been on. I was talking to Alex. We went to a men's Bible study, and it was quite a little dip, a bit of a distance. And so we were in the car, and um, one of our amazing friends, he is the co-host with his wife on another podcast called Courageous Parenting, and they became one of our parenting mentors a handful of years ago. And so we were at the Bible study, and Isaac Tolpin, who is a part of Courageous Parenting, an amazing man, 9 children. Actually, that close friend of mine, who's half my age, is his oldest son. So just kind of bring things full circle. And so we were just talking about podcasting at that Bible study, a little bit off topic. And then, Alex and I, we drove together. And so we drove back home, and we're just like, gosh, like, or he said, I would love to start a podcast one day. And I'm like, no way, me too, and I always had that heart. And he's like, but what would it be about, And it was an easy decision for me. It was about leadership. And so what inspired it was really my journey of leadership, and walking away from what I would call a toxic partnership,
Yeah.
and seeing leadership done in a very image driven way. By that I mean this business partner who I love and who's I believe is also a believer as well, struggled with image taking over integrity.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of leaders that I had seen up to that point looked good, smelled good, sounded good, but we're not trustworthy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you know what? I would love to interview everyday leaders. They don't have huge social media followings potentially. They may not be known potentially, but man, we are inspired by some amazing moms, amazing dads, amazing pastors, amazing business owners. Once again, Idaho is such a beautiful community, rich in just like minded people. I'm like, man, just our community alone, we can interview such people. And so Nathan, the only reason you haven't been interviewed yet on our podcast
You got plenty of
is
guests already.
because everyone has been in studio so far. Nothing has been virtual. It's all been our friends, and friends of friends and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to enter a season of just sitting back and learning from others. So instead of teaching on leadership, I wanted to learn from others. And that's really what inspired the podcast, is because I was in a leadership role with my business previously and I was on stages, I was leading organizations and things like that. I wanted to just sit back, essentially take a sabbatical from
Yeah.
teaching and sit and learn. And so that's what inspired it. And launching a podcast too, without the pressure of it being successful in terms of finances. And that was the first time ever in my life, starting the podcast, that I didn't care about the numbers. I didn't care about the likes, the followers. Alex and I were like, let's just do it because we love it. And so we called it our passion project. And so that's what it is. It's our passion project. It's something we do because we believe in good leadership. And we just want to highlight amazing people doing incredible things in their communities and learning from everyday normal people that are doing extraordinary things. So that's what Created to Lead is all about.
So tell me, you've got a year under your belt. What's one of
Yeah.
your favorite or most memorable episodes?
So it always goes back, and we just did an episode on that, and it's my friend Austin Tolpin, the 20-year-old kid that we interviewed on our episode. It's our number one episode to this day, still, and it far surpasses all of them because at the time he was 19, he's married, he has one child, another on the way, and just his story of being a young leader and how he's able to be such a great light at such a young age has inspired literally hundreds and thousands of people that have listened to that episode. So I would say that episode with Austin Tolpin is my personal favorite, and it just really resonates with a lot of people.
Well, to all those who are listening, you need to go over, check out Created Lead. Make sure you follow them. Definitely leave them a comment and tell them that you arrived through the Redeemed. But great work that you and Alex are doing with Created Lead. Look forward to hearing more of the episodes in this coming year and what you guys have in store. Thank you so much, Sammy, for coming on the show today. Like I said, we could probably talk for another couple of hours, and hopefully if you're listening to this episode, then we can hopefully continue the conversation over on your podcast at some point. But
Yes,
thank you
absolutely.
for taking the time to share your insights, to be honest and vulnerable about the things that are going on in your life. And at the end of the day, I just want to thank God for what he's done in your life, where you are
Mm.
today, and how he's going to continue to use you there in the community that you're in. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your joy, and thank you for your time, man.
Thank you, Nathan. I truly appreciate all that you're doing alongside with Paul, and just for bringing this community for men. As we talked about this episode, it's so important, and I think you and I are super blessed that we have tangible friendships in our life. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that don't. And so, just having this source of digital community with Podcast World, it is so impactful. So just know that I'm so grateful that you guys are doing that. And like I said, we need this in Idaho, what you guys are doing. So if I can be used in any way to bring that to life here, I'd be happy to talk about that offline and make it happen. But just thank you for being willing to be used by the Lord to do what you guys are doing, because it's super inspiring, and I cannot wait to have you on our podcast and get to know more about your story.
Looking forward to it. And we'll definitely circle back around after this year and see how the patience went for the one word for the year, and
Let's do it.
find
We'll do a
out what
follow-up.
the next word is.
Yes. Do you have a word? Can I ask that? Do you have a word yet?
I do not have a word.
Okay.
So I had some specific areas that I focused on this year. My wife had a word.
Cool.
We have not landed yet for where we go in this next year. Honestly, our schedule's been pretty crazy, and that's what we hope in the next couple of weeks to kind of see what Lord has for us. We go into a season of prayer and fasting in January, and so sometimes things come out of that. So it's oftentimes a little bit later than the first of the year. So we'll see what the Lord has in store for us. But thanks for asking. And Sammy, again, thanks for being on the show. God bless, man.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Best is yet to come.
Yes. Amen. Talk soon.